All right. First rule of this channel, we not talk about this channel. Second rule of this channel, this is not legal advice. So this is going to be the 2024 offseason fantasy football preview for the Carolina Panthers. And this one, I'll ask, like, what are you playing for in your fantasy football league? Like, I'm playing to win my league. And that process, again, the same process, win me a league, lose me a league. That process, sometimes I don't make playoffs because I will get aggressive with trying to find guys that have upside. So in this one, when we talk about these guys, like, it costs me nothing to be wrong on a guy that everybody else doesn't like, but it costs them a league if I'm right on some of these guys late in the draft. So the arguments about whether or not a guy is good or not are irrelevant to me, because in the case of like a Malik Neighbors and a Xavier Legette, they're the same guy from my perspective of fantasy football. It all comes down to cost and that range of outcomes. I'm not buying last year's production. I'm buying this year's range of outcomes. And if the range of outcomes is basically the same for the two guys, I'm always going to go with the cheaper guy. I just want to keep putting more of those guys on the bottom of my bench and hope that I can hit on like one or two of them. If I get that win percentage up, the hit percentage on guys later on in my draft, when I get up to like 60, 70%, like, yeah, I'm probably going to win my league, and I'm going to do it like fairly easy. And I've talked about this before. I'm kind of not good at some of these guys that are going at the correct evaluation, because like James Conner won leagues last year. He was going about like pick 49. He returned on pick 49. And I was looking this up ahead of time. Like when we talk about some of these guys, like Jordan Addison was going at pick 96. He won some guys some leagues. He won some weeks to get guys into the playoffs so they could have a chance to have the luck component of fantasy football pay out for them. So this is what we're looking at. And again, a guy like Adam Thielen, weeks 2 through 6, it doesn't matter how bad the offense is. Like, he won some people some games, they got in some playoffs, and then they were able to figure out ways to win their championship. So again, these guys that are like icky because they're part of bad offenses, as long as the price is right and they can return on investment, that's all we're actually looking at when it comes down to these things. So in this case, what the Panthers are doing is they're going to try and find out like how good Bryce Young is, and do they have a chance to win. So last year, 32nd in passing yards, 20 in rushing yards, and tied for last in points for. I'm going to pick the over on that because it's going to get really hard for them to do worse than they did last year. And in this case, they spent $160 million on an offensive tackle and 2 offensive guards. Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis are good. Like, Robert Hunt is like one of the better guards in the league. Damian Lewis is pretty strong themselves. Like, they're at least telling me that they're trying to fix a problem to figure out what they have in Bryce Young. And again, I don't care if Bryce Young is good or not. I care about whether or not he can produce to at least make the toys viable for my fantasy football production. That's all I care about. So some of the stuff that was going on, Dirty Dan Morgan, he was a really good college linebacker, part of the dynasty that was going on at the University of Miami. He played for the Panthers. He gets promoted to general manager. He is going to have a little skin in the game when it comes to some of the old draft picks, because he was there as the assistant general manager before that. And then they bring in Dave Canales. He was part of the Pete Carroll coaching tree up there with Seattle. So think like your Russ, your Geno Smith, and we'll talk a little bit about Marshawn Lynch, believe it or not, when he was running there going on. So last year, Bryce Young and Red Rifle Andy Dalton, they did about 3,200 yards passing between the two of those. I would probably say the over underline is going to be like 3,500 yards. I'm really not going to get shocked if they go all the way up to like 4,000 this year. Bryce Young, he is my quarterback 28. He's going 29 on Fantasy Pros, 193 on Underdog. Remember, this is a best ball league. This is just the meta. We're trying to get an idea of where everybody like values people. He is going with an ADP of 192, quarterback 26. And then on ESPN, he's going at quarterback 22, 198 overall. In college, Bryce Young was not a rusher. He did 81 attempts, 0 yards, 3 touchdowns as his 2021 season at Alabama. His 2022 season, I think it was like his sophomore year, he did 185 yards rushing on 49 attempts, 4 touchdowns. So this 100 or 253 yards that he had last year, it's probably not something that I would expect to sustain. I know I'm going to catch a little flack for this when I say this. Like, the comp that I saw with Bryce Young is similar to like Tom Brady. Like, he's a distributor. You keep him upright and you let him know where his receivers are going to be. He's just going to distribute. He's got a little bit more deceptive athletic ability, but he's not looking to run. He's looking to extend plays so he can throw it. That's how I look at it. So probably the rushing yards are going to be closer to like 150, like 1 or 2 rushing touchdowns. He can call his number if he needs to. And again, like 3,500 yards, like 20 touchdowns. Again, I think he can get really close to like 4,000. I'm not buying him to win me a league. 2 quarterback leagues, he's going to be sneaky. 1 quarterback league, he's going to probably have some appeal as a streamer from here and there. His best thing again is going to be like, can he get to the level where he can support guys from a fantasy perspective going forward? All right. Wide receiver room, I'm going to do running backs last for a reason. So Diontae Johnson, he gets traded from the Steelers. I originally had him as like 19 overall. The idea is we've seen guys go from one team to another team where they need a wide receiver 1 and that guy blows up. I don't think Diontae Johnson is that guy. I think he's limited. Higher volume, lower efficiency type of guy. Like you're looking at his ceiling being somewhere along the lines of like 2021, 2020 Pittsburgh, like 169, 144 targets, something along the lines of like 900 to 1,100 yards and 6 to 9 touchdowns, something along those lines. Not going to win you a league. Definitely not going to lose you a league. If you're pulling the trigger on him, I definitely think that there's a possibility that he can do that again. The other guy in this wide receiver room, Adam Thielen. He turns 34 in August. So outside of this, pseudo lead winging ability, like or playoff getting ability that he did in week 2 to week 6, like the wheels fell off when it came to Adam Thielen last year. There's going to be a redundancy in this offense, and he is scheduled to like probably make the roster this year in 2024. The out looks like it's like next year or after this season. So I would be expecting he's going to make the roster. There's a redundancy between how Adam Thielen's going to play as this technician and Diontae Johnson is going to play as the technician. I don't know which one of these guys plays the X. I think there's a possibility that like 2nd round draft pick last year, Jonathan Mingo, or 2021 2nd round draft pick Terrace Marshall. They're both 4-4 guys. They're bigger guys. They play the X. And that means like the chances that we're going to see like Diontae Johnson, Adam Thielen, and Xavier Legette all on the field at the same time may be smaller than we think. That's something that I would be wanting to pay attention to in camp overall. I think Legette is going to play better as the Z, where they can move him around and manufacture touches for him. That's probably more where Diontae Johnson plays also. And again, outside of like rolling Adam Thielen as his backside, like old man technician X, maybe like Keenan Allen, but Keenan Allen plays more like moving around in the slot and stuff like that. Like, I don't know how this wide receiver room is going to break out. So Diontae Johnson, he's my wide receiver 44. He's going wide receiver 40 on Fantasy Pros, 85 overall. On ESPN, he's going at 82 overall, wide receiver 35. And over on Fantasy Pros, he's going as wide receiver 45 with an ADP of 79.5. Like, I think this is fair. Like I said, guys like this, like if you're going to be punting the wide receiver position, I don't know why you would be doing that. But if you did, like to have this guy roll in and be like a relatively safe floor guy in that like flex to wide receiver 3 range, maybe like emergency wide receiver 2, I think he's fine. Like I said, I just don't know how he wins you a league. And we're going to talk more about Xavier Legette here in a second. Adam Thielen here, I don't like, he's going to get moved off my board. He's all the way down. He's fallen down to wide receiver 69 as I keep splitting guys and moving guys around. Like guys like Malachi Corley are going to have a little bit more interest to me to win leagues. If he stays in this role in this like 70% snaps range, he's going to be able to flirt with like wide receiver 3 ranges of outcome. He's wide receiver 62 on Fantasy Pros, 151 overall. On ESPN, we're going to talk a little bit more about this. He's 126 wide receiver 54, and then overall on Underdog, he's wide receiver 73, 164 overall. I don't know how he wins the leagues. Like he may end up being in that like 90 to 100 target range, like that go out and get me a first down, like win a route type of range. I don't know how he wins leagues. Especially like this offense at best is going to be like 4,000 yards passing. At worst, it's going to be like probably like closer to like that 3,200 that it had last year. So like getting a guy like this at all, that's why I would end up moving him off my board. Like, yeah, you could spend on this guy late, and he's going to give you like that ugly possession, like wide receiver slot type guy. But I don't know how he wins, and that's why I'll move guys like this gone, and they still have some fantasy value. Like I could definitely see him being like in that 6 to 7 targets a game range all season. And if you're rolling him out there when he gets a touchdown, like, hey, you got to push, you got a 40-degree day. All right. So the big news on all of this is Xavier Legette. I moved him down slightly because I moved Neighbors down. They're both attached to offenses that we think are going to be bad. He's my wide receiver 35. Neighbors is my wide receiver 34. I'm not speaking poorly about Neighbors. I'm talking purely about prices in this case. On Fantasy Pros, Legette is wide receiver 69. He's 167 overall. On Underdog, he is going at wide receiver 65 with an ADP of 138. And then on ESPN, he's going wide receiver 29, wide receiver 57. Again, I don't know why these guys get paired together. Adam Thielen ain't going to win you a league. Xavier Legette can. And that's all I really care about in this. And then the interesting thing, they're right next to each other on ESPN. If I see both of these offenses as being bad and both these quarterbacks as being like imperfect, the problem is like all I need to do is spend on the guy that is going to cost me less to be able to return on maybe the same theoretical range of outcomes. And this one, I think I have some of the wide receivers pulled up at a certain point. Like if you're spending on last year, if you were spending on DK Metcalf and I spent on Jordan Addison, DK Metcalf, let's say, was like third round draft capital last year. Jordan Addison was going in the range of like a 10th round pick. Like I win in this case because we get relatively the same outcome. I get 13 points a game. You get 14 points a game. And the same thing, like Calvin Ridley gets hype trained up to, like, in some leagues I've seen he was going like in the late second round, and there's Adam Thielen, and you were getting Adam Thielen for free. Now, this is not an apples to apples conversation because, again, it's about point distribution and when those points were coming up. But I'm just saying, like, the risks that are involved with the players, Neighbors going at pick 49 overall, and he is ranked higher on my board. I have Neighbors as 34. I have Legette 35. He doesn't have the ability to win me a league the same way that Xavier Legette does, unless you're right. And if you like Neighbors and you want to go up and spend on Neighbors and he finishes a top 10 wide receiver and Xavier Legette doesn't win me a league, then you win. And that's just how it goes. In this case, between these two guys and their prices, I would rather have, the guys attached to better quarterbacks in your Ladd McConkeys and your Brian Thomas Jr.'s. But Xavier Legette, first round draft pick. We are expecting that the offense can't be worse than it was with the Panthers last year. And the athletic measurables of that 4.40 guy with Xavier Legette probably has a very similar range of outcomes to Malik Neighbors, but it's going to cost me, 70, 80 picks less to find out with Xavier Legette. That's how I would play this overall from a fantasy perspective, because if they're both projected to be bad offenses, and it, again, doesn't really matter if we're having the conversation about like how good Malik Neighbors is or how bad Xavier Legette is, how late the breakout was. Bryce Young is not good at football. Daniel Jones is undervalued. I don't care about any of that. What I care about is if I draft Malik Neighbors at wide receiver 26 and he returns at wide receiver 26, how does that help me win a league? So he has to significantly outperform wide receiver 26 in a way that if I draft Xavier Legette at wide receiver 57 and he returns wide receiver 35, like who won the league at that point? Like who's closer to winning that championship? That's what I would be looking at with these guys down the line. And I do generally like Xavier Legette because I think there's an opportunity for a number one to emerge in an offense. And last year, when I talk about like Nico Collins, any number one in any offense is going to have fantasy value. And there's a lot to like about Xavier Legette when it comes down to that. The main thing I like about Xavier Legette is the price. That's the main thing to like about it overall. All right. Moving on to the tight end room, I have Jatavion Sanders as my tight end 16. It's the same conversation we just got done having with Xavier Legette. There is a road for Jatavion Sanders to finish as the number one or the number two attached to this offense. He's a fourth round draft capital. I don't like him overall as a guy. Like there's certain things that are okay. 4.69 40 guy. Again, it's just the story. That's all that matters from a fantasy perspective. Is there an opportunity for him to step in and jump up? And this is why I have my tight end guys pulled up right here. Is there a way that I can get Jatavion Sanders into this 120 target range? Is there a way that he is this year's Sam Laporta? And the answer to that is yeah, because like there's an opportunity for him to get that many opportunities attached to this offense. That's the easy. Like he has to beat out old man, the ghost of Adam Thielen, and Diontae Johnson, who's a flawed prospect. And then again, if you're telling yourself the story that Xavier Legette isn't going to break out because he was an older guy, that breakout age older guy in college. He's overvalued. Then now we can start telling the story about like Jatavion Sanders has value. And again, he's the last guy that I think should be drafted in all leagues because of that road that he has to win leagues. There's other guys when it comes to tight ends. And I'll talk about like Dallas Goedert. There are other guys that are going to be part of better offenses like Dalton Schultz that are probably not going to be able to win leagues that are safer. And if that's how you want to play, if you want to be trying to punt and get third place, I'm going to be trying to win my league. I may not end up making playoffs. I still don't know how you win the league. We get the same outcome, right? So again, at the end of the day, that's how I would view these things. Now, in the case of tight ends, if Tommy Tremble, who was a 4th-round draft pick, I think in 2020, if he wins the job, then Jatavion Sanders is probably off the board, and Tommy Tremble is going to be like in the wide receiver 20s, just not going to be interesting at that point, like deep wide receiver 20s after all those like tight end 4s, or excuse me, the number 4 offense, number 4 in offenses tight ends like your Dalton Schultz and your Dallas Goederts at that point. All right. We got a lot to talk about when we talk about the running back room for the Panthers. So the guy we all want is Jonathon Brooks. He's the number 1 running back that was off the board. He probably would have been a 1st-round draft pick if he hadn't torn his ACL. In this case, like now it becomes an issue of that ramp-up period, and I have Bryce here last year coming off the ACL. Starts off, he does 31 snaps in week 1, and he ramps up to 66% snaps in week 6. That's what I would be expecting with Chuba Hubbard or Rashad Penny. Now, I think there's a good chance that Chuba Hubbard gets dealt because he's in the last year of his rookie deal, and Miles Sanders gets cut or traded. That's why with Rashad Penny coming in, it makes it really interesting. He's basically on a veteran minimum, and in this case, like I would ask, like it's really weird that he would go there because with Carolina. The only place Carolina was either the only place he got offered a job or it's the best place for him to make a roster. It's probably not like both. So like in this case, like if they're planning to ship Chuba Hubbard and they're planning to get rid of Miles Sanders, then Rachaad White is going to be in this role at the beginning of the season when they ramp up Jonathon Brooks. Now, it would not surprise me because the Panthers, what they're trying to do for the future, there's no point on putting excess wear on Jonathon Brooks. There's still going to be the possibility that Jonathon Brooks starts the season on a PUP, and that would explain why you bring in a Rachaad White also, because you're not expecting to have Jonathon Brooks until like 6 weeks in the season, and then it doesn't really matter if they cut or they trade one of either Chuba Hubbard or Miles Sanders. If any of this stuff makes sense, it just becomes roster construction stuff, because the main thing we're looking at is who's going to have value early in the season and who's going to have the ability to win a league, and that's what we're breaking down, because Chuba Hubbard and Jonathon Brooks right now are my running back 22. I'm not going to split them until I try and figure this stuff out. And if I'm in certain leagues and I want to have that rental at the beginning of the season, think you're James Conner or Adam Thielen, like I'm going to be pulling the trigger in that running back 22 range when it comes to Miles Sanders or Chuba Hubbard. Now, if Chuba Hubbard is going outside of running back 22, which would put him like pick 70 to 80 ish. I may end up having this bell cow RB2 to start my season in that range. So if I take my capital and I go other places, I'm going to have that guy to start the season off. That's if Jonathon Brooks gets pupped at the beginning of the year. That's what I'd be looking at with Chuba. Even if he doesn't get pupped at the beginning of the year, I'm going to be expecting that Chuba is going to have fantasy value, because I'm going to expect that ramp up when it comes to what the Jets did with Bryce with Jonathon Brooks this year. He's going to be in that low-end RB2 type of range. Now, he could get dealt. This is why we were breaking all this stuff down, and that would jump Rashad Penny into this range. So when it comes to Chuba Hubbard right now, he's my running back 22. He is going at, running back 42 overall on Fantasy Pros, 130. On Underdog, he is going at running back 53 with 173, so I think that's undervalued. And then on ESPN, he is going at 167, and they have him with Miles Sanders. Again, like that would be the same process. There's still a possibility that Miles Sanders ends up being that guy to start the season as they ramp Jonathon Brooks back up from that ACL. And in this case, that would be Rachaad Penny if all these other guys get moved. And I find it very suspect that we're going to get any more than one of these guys, Chuba Hubbard, Miles Sanders, and Rashad Penny, making the roster at this point on the season. All right. So now the big thing is when we talk about like Jonathan Brooks, he's going to be the guy. Like if you're trying to punt, Chuba Hubbard. If you're trying to win a league, Jonathan Brooks. So in this case, I talk about Marshawn Lynch, who was back when he was playing like one of the better designed receivers in the game. And that's what Jonathan Brooks is going to give you. One of the better pass blockers, one of the best receivers, one of the best probably like pure running backs in the draft overall. As he gets ramped up second half of the season, you are betting on this offense being better because you need those red zone opportunities for him to be able to return on investment. Again, he's my running back 22. I could see moving him all the way up into like the top 10 if he doesn't go on the pup and they move Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders gets dealt something along those lines. I would move him up that high if there's a certain way that all these things break down, because then we could theoretically look at Jonathan Brooks being a bell cow to start the season off. Running back 36 overall on Fantasy Pros, 110 overall on Underdog. He is going at running back 24 with an ADP of 88. And then on ESPN, he's better on 66 overall, running back 19. That's about where he should be going, because again, like the same possibility that he's going to be a bust is built into the same possibility he can win you a league at running back 19. I have him at running back 22. I am expecting to move him up if we get the right news. I'll move him down if we don't at that range. So that's what I'd be looking at with him. And there's really no point on doing an over underline when it comes to Jonathan Brooks, because like it's going to be depending on news that we don't have right now. But again, this would be a guy that would hit the category of the design passing work. And then it also just at that point depends on the red zone usage. That's going to be something like betting on Bryce Young taking that step forward in this offense. And then I would say by the end of the year, like, yeah, you probably are going to be looking at similar. And I want to be, when I stress this, like he's not Bryce, but you are going to have the ability to have like higher efficiency on lower touches by the end of the year. And that would make me happy to be like high end running back 2, low end running back 1 by the end of the year. So anyway, that's about all I got. And yeah,